My mother-in-law secretly DNA tested our baby, and the results exposed her own 30-year affair. Delilah had always been controlling, but I thought sneaking into our nursery to swab baby Rosalind's cheek was a new low. I only found out because the testing company called our house by mistake, asking to confirm her address for the results. What DNA test? I asked Brayden that night. His face went pale. Mom wouldn't do that, but she had. When I confronted her, Delilah's explanation was even worse than I'd imagined. I needed to make sure Rosalind was really Brayden's, she said, not even apologetic. With your family history. My family history was squeaky clean. Hers, apparently, was not. The test results arrived 3 days later. I intercepted the mail and opened them, expecting to see confirmation that Rosalind was indeed our daughter. Instead, I found something that made my hands shake. The test showed that Delilah wasn't Brayden's biological mother. I stared at the paper, reading it again. The woman who'd raised my husband, who'd questioned my fidelity, who'd violated our baby's privacy, wasn't even related to him. That evening, I spread the results on the kitchen table when the whole family gathered for Sunday dinner. Crawford, Brayden's father, was cutting into his roast when I cleared my throat. Delilah, these came for you today. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. What are those? DNA results. Turns out you're not Rosalind's grandmother after all. The room went silent. Crawford's knife clattered to his plate. Brayden grabbed the papers, his eyes scanning frantically. This has to be wrong. Read the fine print, I said calmly. It shows maternal lineage. Delilah shares 0 DNA with our baby, because she shares 0 DNA with you. Crawford's voice was barely a whisper. Delilah? The color drained from her face. For 30 years, she'd lived a lie. And now it was unraveling at Sunday dinner. I can explain, she stammered. You'd better, Crawford said, standing slowly, because according to this, the son I raised isn't mine. Delilah started crying, but I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken of our security camera footage. Here's you last Tuesday, sneaking into Rosalind's room with a cotton swab. The footage was crystal clear. Delilah entering our house with her spare key, tiptoeing upstairs and swabbing our sleeping baby's mouth. You violated our trust and our daughter's privacy, I continued. All to prove what? That I'm unfaithful? Well, congratulations. You've proven you are. Brayden looked between his parents, his whole world crashing down. Who's my real father? Delilah sobbed harder. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me, Crawford roared, slamming his fist on the table. That's when she said the words that changed everything. It's your brother Thaddeus. The silence that followed was deafening. Crawford's brother Thaddeus had been his best man, his business partner, the godfather to his children. 30 years, Crawford whispered. 30 years of lies. But then Brayden's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went white. What now? I asked. He held up his phone with trembling hands. Thaddeus is at the front door. The doorbell rang 3 times in quick succession, followed by heavy knocking. Through the dining room window, I could see Thaddeus's silhouette on the front porch, his shoulders hunched against the evening rain. Don't answer it, Delilah whispered, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Crawford stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. Like hell I won't. He stormed toward the front door, but I caught his arm. Wait, let's think about this. Think about what? Crawford's voice cracked. My brother has been lying to my face for 3 decades. My wife has been lying to my face for 3 decades. What exactly is there to think about? The knocking grew more insistent. Thaddeus's voice carried through the heavy oak door. Crawford? Your car's in the driveway. I know you're home. Brayden sat frozen at the table, staring at the DNA results like they might change if he looked hard enough. I don't understand. How is this possible? Delilah wiped her nose with a cloth napkin, leaving a streak of foundation on the white fabric. It was one time. One horrible mistake. One time that created a human being. Crawford spat. One time that stole 30 years of my life. The front door creaked open. We'd forgotten to lock it after arriving for dinner. Crawford? Thaddeus called from the foyer. Delilah? I was driving by and saw all the cars. Thought I'd stop in. His footsteps echoed down the hardwood hallway. Within seconds, he appeared in the dining room doorway, still wearing his work clothes, khakis and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked like an older version of Brayden, something I'd never noticed before. Well, this looks cozy, Thaddeus said, taking in the scene. His eyes landed on the scattered papers, then on Delilah's tear-streaked face. What's going on? Nobody spoke. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, then unbearable. Uncle Thaddeus? Brayden finally said, his voice hollow. Apparently, you're not my uncle. Thaddeus's face went through several expressions. Confusion, then understanding, then pure terror. What are you talking about? I picked up the DNA results and held them out. These say you're his father. Thaddeus didn't take the papers. He didn't need to. The truth was written all over his face. The same face Brayden had inherited. Jesus Christ, he whispered, sinking into the nearest chair. How did you find out? Your lover here decided to DNA test our baby, I said, gesturing toward Delilah. Wanted to make sure I wasn't cheating on her precious son. Turns out she's been the cheater all along. Thaddeus looked at Delilah with something between pity and disgust. You told them? I didn't have a choice, she sobbed. The test results. There's always a choice, Crawford interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. You could have chosen not to sleep with my brother. You could have chosen not to lie to me for 30 years. You could have chosen not to let me raise another man's child while thinking he was mine. You love Brayden, Delilah protested. That hasn't changed. Everything has changed, Crawford exploded. Everything. My marriage, my family, my business partnership, all built on lies. Thaddeus stood up slowly. Crawford, I need you to know. Don't. Crawford held up a hand. Don't you dare try to explain this away. But you need to understand the circumstances. The circumstances? Crawford laughed bitterly. What circumstances could possibly justify betraying your own brother? Thaddeus glanced at Delilah, who was now crying so hard she could barely breathe. You were deployed. 3 months in Afghanistan. Delilah was pregnant with your first child. I was pregnant with Veronica, Delilah whispered. You lost the baby, Thaddeus continued. Delilah was devastated. You were unreachable overseas. She needed someone, and I was there. So you slept with my wife, Crawford said flatly. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Crawford's voice rose. Enlighten me, brother. What was it like when you decided to screw my wife while I was serving my country? Braden suddenly stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Stop. All of you just stop. We all turned to look at him. At 26, Braden was a successful architect with his father's, Crawford's, strong jawline, and his mother's green eyes. Except now, we knew he had Thaddeus's jawline, not Crawford's. I need air, Braden said, pushing past Thaddeus toward the door. Honey, where are you going? I called after him. I don't know, he said without turning around. Somewhere that makes sense. The front door slammed behind him, leaving the 4 adults standing in the wreckage of what used to be a family. Thaddeus cleared his throat. I should go after him. You should go home, I said firmly. You've done enough damage for 1 lifetime. He's my son. He's Crawford's son, I shot back. Biology doesn't erase 26 years of being a father. Crawford was staring at the wall, his face blank. I taught him to ride a bike. I walked him to his first day of school. I helped him with algebra homework. I gave him advice about girls. And that matters more than DNA, I said softly. Crawford's laugh was hollow. Does it? Because right now, looking at him, all I can see is my brother's betrayal staring back at me. Delilah finally spoke up. Crawford, please, we can work through this. Work through this? Crawford turned to face his wife of 31 years. You lied to me about the most fundamental thing in our marriage. You let me believe Braden was mine while you knew the truth. How exactly do we work through that? Counseling? Therapy? I'll do whatever it takes. What about him? Crawford pointed at Thaddeus. What about our business? What about family gatherings? What about the fact that I have to look at my brother every day knowing he's the biological father of the son I raised? Thaddeus stepped forward. Crawford, we can figure this out. Get out, Crawford said quietly. What? Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Get out of my business. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything. Crawford's voice was steel. You have 48 hours to buy me out of our partnership, or I'll sell my half to the highest bidder. Either way, I never want to see your face again. Thaddeus looked stunned. We built this company together. We built it on a lie, just like everything else in my life, apparently. The room fell silent except for Delilah's quiet sobbing. I realized this was far from over. This was just the beginning of a complete family implosion. I should check on Braden, I said, grabbing my keys from the counter. Wait. Delilah reached for my arm. You're not going to leave us, are you? You and Braden? I looked at her. Really looked at her. For 3 years, she'd been a thorn in my side, questioning every decision I made, criticizing everything from my career to my parenting style. She'd made snide comments about my cooking, my housekeeping, my family background, and now I understood why. She'd been projecting her own guilt onto me, assuming I was capable of the same deception she'd been living with for decades. I don't know, I said honestly. Right now, I need to find my husband and make sure he's okay. But what about us? What about the family? What family? I asked. The one built on lies? That family doesn't exist anymore. I left them standing in the dining room and went to find Braden. His car was gone from the driveway, but I knew where he'd be. There was a park about 10 minutes away where we'd had our first date, a quiet place with a small lake and walking trails. Whenever Braden needed to think, that's where he went. I found him sitting on our bench, staring out at the water. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with humidity and the smell of wet earth. Hey, I said softly, sitting down beside him. Hey. We sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks glide across the dark water. Finally, Braden spoke. I don't know who I am anymore. You're the same person you were this morning. Am I? This morning I was Crawford's son. Tonight I'm the product of an affair between my mom and my uncle. He laughed bitterly. God, that sounds like a bad soap opera. DNA doesn't change who you are, Braden. You're still the man I married. You're still Rosalind's father. You're still the person who cries at dog rescue videos and makes me coffee every morning and leaves little notes in my lunch bag. But I'm not Crawford's son. Yes, you are. I turned to face him. He changed your diapers. He taught you to drive. He walked you down the aisle at our wedding. He's your dad in every way that matters. Braden wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I saw the way he looked at me tonight, like I was a stranger. He's hurt and angry. Give him time. What if he can't get past this? What if every time he looks at me, all he sees is mom's betrayal? I didn't have an answer for that, because honestly, I was wondering the same thing. What are we going to do about your mom? I asked instead. I have no idea. I'm so angry I can barely think straight. She violated our trust, our baby's privacy. She accused me of cheating while hiding her own affair. I know. And Thaddeus, I can't believe he just went along with this charade for 30 years. Watching Crawford raise his biological son, being involved in every major milestone, and never saying a word. Braden leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. What kind of person does that? A coward. We sat in silence again, both lost in our own thoughts. Finally, I asked the question that had been nagging at me. Do you want to know him? As your biological father, I mean? Braden was quiet for so long, I thought he hadn't heard me. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know. Part of me is curious, but mostly, I just feel sick. He's been Uncle Thaddeus my whole life. He taught me to fish. He came to my little league games. He gave toasts at my graduation and my wedding. Braden's voice cracked. How do you go from calling someone uncle to calling them dad? Maybe you don't. Maybe he stays Uncle Thaddeus, but now you know the truth. Can you do that? Can you just compartmentalize something this huge? I thought about it. I don't know. This is uncharted territory for all of us. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Delilah. Please come back. Crawford locked himself in his study and won't come out. Thaddeus left. I don't know what to do. I showed the message to Braden. He sighed heavily. We should go back, shouldn't we? We don't have to. We could go home, put Rosalind to bed, and deal with this tomorrow. No, I need to talk to Crawford. I need to tell him that this doesn't change how I feel about him. Are you sure you're ready for that conversation? Braden stood up and extended his hand to help me off the bench. I'm not sure I'll ever be ready, but avoiding it won't make it go away. The drive back to Crawford and Delilah's house was quiet. Both of our minds were spinning, trying to process the magnitude of what had been revealed. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed Thaddeus's car was indeed gone, but all the lights in the house were still on. Delilah met us at the front door, her eyes swollen from crying. Thank God you came back. I was afraid you'd never speak to us again. Where's Crawford? Braden asked. In his study. He's been in there for 2 hours. I tried knocking, but he won't answer. Braden walked down the hallway and tapped gently on the study door. Crawford, it's me. Can we talk? No response. Please. I know you're angry, but I need to tell you something. After a long moment, we heard the lock click. Crawford opened the door, and I was shocked by his appearance. His hair was disheveled, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past few hours. What do you want to say? Crawford asked quietly. That you're my dad. DNA test or no DNA test, you're my father. You raised me. You loved me. You shaped who I am. That doesn't change because of some stupid biology. Crawford's facade cracked. Braden, no, let me finish. I'm angry at Mom. I'm angry at Thaddeus. I'm furious about the lies and the deception, but I'm not angry at you, and I don't want this to come between us. Crawford pulled Braden into a fierce hug, both men crying openly. I'm sorry, Crawford whispered. When I first saw those results, all I could think about was the betrayal. But you're right. You're my son. You'll always be my son. I felt tears welling up in my own eyes watching them. This was what family really meant. Not biology, but love and commitment and choosing each other every day. But my sentimental moment was interrupted by Delilah clearing her throat behind us. Does this mean we can work through this as a family? Crawford and Braden separated, and I saw Crawford's expression harden again. Don't mistake my love for my son as forgiveness for what you've done. Crawford, please, no. You made your choice 30 years ago when you decided to sleep with my brother. You made it again every day for 3 decades when you chose to lie to me. You made it again last week when you decided to violate my daughter-in-law's trust and my granddaughter's privacy. But we can get past this. We can rebuild. I'm filing for divorce, Crawford said simply. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Delilah's face went white. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. But what about our marriage? 31 years together? Built on a lie, Crawford said firmly. I can forgive a lot of things, Delilah, but I can't forgive this level of deception. And I sure as hell can't forgive you dragging our children into your paranoid delusions. It wasn't paranoid, Delilah protested weakly. I was just trying to protect the family. You were projecting, I said, finally finding my voice. You've been so guilt-ridden about your own affair that you assumed I was capable of the same thing. You've questioned everything about me from day one because you couldn't live with your own lies. Delilah opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She knew I was right. I'll stay at the hotel downtown tonight, Crawford said. Tomorrow I'll start looking for an apartment. I'll send movers for my things once I find a place. Crawford, wait! But he was already walking toward the front door. Braden, call me tomorrow. We'll have lunch and talk about everything except your mother and my brother. Dad? Braden called after him. Crawford paused at the door. Yeah? I love you. Crawford's voice was thick with emotion. I love you too, son. And then he was gone, leaving us alone with Delilah and the wreckage of her lies. Delilah collapsed onto the sofa, crying harder than before. This is all my fault. I've destroyed everything. I wanted to comfort her. It was my natural instinct. But I was too angry, too hurt by her suspicions and her actions. We should go, I said to Braden. Rosalind needs her bedtime routine, and we all need some time to process this. Braden nodded. Mom, we'll talk soon, but right now I need some space. Delilah looked up at us with desperate eyes. You'll still let me see Rosalind, won't you? She's my granddaughter. I felt Braden tense beside me, because technically, Rosalind wasn't Delilah's granddaughter at all. She was Thaddeus's granddaughter. We'll figure it out, I said diplomatically. But as we drove home, I was already making mental notes. Delilah's key to our house would need to be returned. The spare key we'd given Thaddeus would need to be collected. Our security system passwords would need to be changed. Because the truth was, I didn't trust either of them anymore, and I wasn't sure I ever would again. That night, after we'd put Rosalind to bed and sat in our living room rehashing the evening's events, Braden asked me the question I'd been dreading. Do you think less of me, knowing that I'm the product of an affair? Don't be ridiculous, I said immediately. You're not responsible for your parents' choices. But it explains so much, doesn't it? Why Mom was always so paranoid about infidelity, why she never trusted anyone completely, why she was so obsessed with keeping the family together at all costs. I thought about that. Maybe. But it doesn't excuse her behavior toward me, or what she did to Rosalind. No, it doesn't, Braden agreed. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that she swabbed our baby without permission. What kind of person does that? Someone who's been living with guilt for so long that it's poisoned her judgment. We were quiet for a while, both staring at the baby monitor on the coffee table. Rosalind was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her family tree had been completely rearranged in the span of one evening. I keep thinking about Thaddeus, Braden said finally. All those years of family gatherings, holidays, birthdays, he knew the whole time that I was his son, and he never said anything. What do you think you would have done in his position? Braden considered this. I'd like to think I would have told the truth, but honestly, I don't know. It's easy to judge from the outside. He was in an impossible situation. Telling the truth would have destroyed 2 families instead of 1. But living a lie destroyed them anyway, didn't it? just 30 years later. I couldn't argue with that logic. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. It was Crawford. "I'm sorry to call so late," he said when I answered, "but I wanted to check on you both, and I wanted to apologize." "You don't have anything to apologize for," I said, putting the call on speaker so Brayden could hear. "Yes, I do. I've been thinking about what happened tonight, and I realized I never asked how you're doing with all this. Your mother-in-law violated your trust and your daughter's privacy. Your family dynamic just imploded, and I was so caught up in my own pain that I didn't check on you." I felt tears prick my eyes. This was why Crawford had been such a good father to Brayden. He thought about other people even in his darkest moments. "I'm angry," I admitted, "and hurt. And honestly, I'm worried about what this means for our relationship with both of them going forward." "Whatever you decide about Delilah, I'll support you," Crawford said. "You don't owe her forgiveness just because she's Brayden's mother, and you certainly don't owe her access to Rosalind just because she raised Brayden." "Thank you," I whispered. "And Brayden, you still there, son?" "I'm here," Brayden said, his voice thick. "I meant what I said earlier. You're my boy. That will never change." "I know. I love you too." After we hung up, Brayden and I sat in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, he spoke. "I want to get a restraining order against Thaddeus." I looked at him in surprise. "Really?" "He crossed a boundary when he entered our house without permission to take DNA samples. And now that I know the truth about his relationship with Mom, I don't trust his motivations. I don't want him having access to Rosalind." "What about Delilah?" "I'm still thinking about that. She's Rosalind's grandmother, or the woman who raised her father anyway, but she violated our trust in the worst possible way. She also has a spare key to our house." "Not anymore, she doesn't." Brayden was right. Whatever we decided about maintaining relationships with Delilah and Thaddeus, we needed to secure our home first. The next morning, I called a locksmith while Brayden went to meet Crawford for lunch. By the time he returned, all our locks had been changed and our security system had been updated with new codes. "How did it go with your dad?" I asked as he walked through the door. "Good. Weird, but good. He's definitely filing for divorce. His lawyer thinks it'll be straightforward since they don't have any minor children together, and most of their assets are clearly delineated." "How's he handling everything emotionally?" "Better than I expected, actually. He said he's been feeling disconnected from Mom for years, and now he understands why. She's been carrying this massive secret, and it affected everything about their relationship." "What about Thaddeus?" "Crawford's buying him out of the business." Thaddeus tried to call him this morning, but Crawford didn't answer. "I think he's serious about cutting all ties." I couldn't blame him. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was professional too. Crawford and Thaddeus had been business partners for over 20 years, building a successful construction company together. Now Crawford would have to wonder if every major decision, every contract, every client relationship had been influenced by Thaddeus's guilt and need to overcompensate. "Did you tell him about the restraining order?" "Yeah, he thinks it's a good idea. He's also going to talk to his lawyer about whether Thaddeus could try to claim grandparents' rights to Rosalind." That thought hadn't occurred to me, and it made my stomach churn. Could he? Crawford doesn't think so, since he's never had a legal or established relationship with her. But it's worth checking. Over the next few days, we settled into a strange new routine. Crawford called every morning to check on us, and every evening to say goodnight to Rosalind over video chat. He'd found a furnished apartment downtown and seemed to be adjusting to bachelor life better than anyone expected. Delilah, on the other hand, called constantly. She left voicemails begging for forgiveness, sent flowers with apologetic notes, and even showed up at my office one afternoon. "Please," she said when security called to ask if I wanted to see her. "I just need 5 minutes to explain." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her in the lobby. "I know you hate me," she said immediately, "and I understand why. But I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you or Rosalind." "But you did hurt us," I said calmly. "You violated our privacy, our trust, and our daughter's bodily autonomy." "I was scared," Delilah said, tears already streaming down her face. "I've been living with this secret for so long, and it's made me paranoid and suspicious. When I looked at you, all I could see was my own guilt reflected back. So you decided to project that guilt onto me." "Yes, and it was wrong. I know it was wrong." "It wasn't just wrong, Delilah. It was cruel. For 3 years, you've made me feel like I wasn't good enough for your son, like I couldn't be trusted, like I was some kind of threat to your family. And all along, you were the threat." She flinched at my words but didn't argue. "I want to make it right. I don't think you can. Some things can't be fixed with apologies. But Rosalind is my granddaughter." "Is she?" I interrupted. "Because technically, she's Thaddeus's granddaughter." Delilah's face crumpled. "Please don't punish her for my mistakes." "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting my family from people who have proven they can't be trusted." "What would it take? What would I have to do to earn back your trust?" I thought about that question. I honestly don't know if it's possible. You didn't just lie to Crawford, you built your entire adult life around that lie. You raised a child while deceiving his father. You entered into business partnerships and family relationships under false pretenses. How do I trust someone who's capable of that level of deception? I was young and scared and stupid. You were young and scared and stupid 30 years ago. What's your excuse for last week? Delilah had no answer for that. "I need time," I said finally, "and space. Maybe eventually we can figure out some kind of relationship for Rosalind's sake. But right now, I can't even look at you without feeling angry." I left her standing in the lobby and went back to work, but I couldn't concentrate for the rest of the day. Despite my anger, I felt sorry for her. She'd destroyed her marriage, alienated her son, and lost access to her granddaughter, all because she couldn't live with the consequences of a decades-old mistake. That evening, Brayden came home with news. Thaddeus showed up at Crawford's apartment today. What happened? Crawford wouldn't let him in, so they had it out in the hallway. Apparently, half the building heard them screaming at each other. What did Thaddeus want? To explain himself, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. All the usual things people want when they get caught. And Crawford? Told him he had 48 hours to finalize the business buyout, or he'd sell his shares to their biggest competitor. I winced. That would effectively destroy the company they'd built together. But I couldn't blame Crawford for wanting to hurt Thaddeus the way he'd been hurt. Thaddeus also wants to meet with me, Braden said quietly. How do you feel about that? Confused. Part of me wants answers, but part of me thinks it'll just make everything worse. What kind of answers? I don't know. Why he never told me. Whether he ever wanted to tell me. If he regrets what happened. If he's proud of how I turned out. Braden laughed bitterly. It's messed up, right? I shouldn't care what he thinks. It's not messed up. He's your biological father. It's natural to be curious. But Crawford is my real father. Both things can be true. That weekend, Braden decided to meet with Thaddeus. I stayed home with Rosalind, partly because I didn't trust myself to be civil to him, and partly because I wanted to give them privacy. Braden was gone for 3 hours. When he came home, he looked emotionally drained. How did it go? I asked. Weird. Surreal. He cried a lot. What did he say? Braden collapsed onto the couch next to me. That he's regretted what happened every day for 30 years. That watching Crawford raise me was both wonderful and torturous. That he wanted to tell me the truth 1,000 times but couldn't figure out how to do it without destroying everyone's lives. Do you believe him? I think so. He seemed genuinely tormented by it all. Did he explain why it happened? Yeah, pretty much what he said the other night. Crawford was deployed. Mom had just miscarried. She was devastated and alone. Thaddeus was staying at the house to help with repairs while Crawford was gone. One night she broke down completely, and he comforted her, and it led to more. And then she found out she was pregnant. 2 months later, she knew immediately that it wasn't Crawford's because the timing didn't match up. She and Thaddeus agreed to never tell anyone. What about when Crawford came home? He was so happy about the pregnancy that neither of them had the heart to destroy him. And then as time went on, it became impossible to tell the truth without admitting to years of lying. I could see the logic, even if I disagreed with their choices. How do you feel about it all now? Sad, mostly. For everyone involved. Thaddeus has been carrying this guilt for 30 years. Mom has been eaten alive by her own secret. Crawford's whole life was built on a lie, and I've been walking around not knowing who I really am. You know who you are, I said firmly. This doesn't change that, doesn't it? I look in the mirror now and see Thaddeus instead of Crawford. I hear his voice when I laugh. I see his expressions when I'm thinking. So what? You still have Crawford's values, his work ethic, his sense of humor. You still have your mom's creativity and determination. DNA is just one piece of who you are. I know you're right. It's just going to take time to accept it. What does Thaddeus want from you? A relationship, I think. He asked if he could take me to lunch occasionally. Maybe attend Rosalind's birthday parties. Be part of her life in some way. And what did you tell him? That I needed to think about it. And that any relationship would have to be approved by you first. I appreciated that he was considering my feelings, but I wasn't sure I was ready to make that decision. What do you want? Honestly, I don't know. It feels disloyal to Crawford to have a relationship with Thaddeus. But at the same time, I have all these questions about family medical history, personality traits, where certain quirks come from. You could get those answers without having an ongoing relationship. True. Or you could try having coffee with him once a month and see how it goes. Would you be okay with that? I thought about it. I think so. As long as he understands that he doesn't get automatic access to Rosalind. He's not her grandfather. Crawford is. If Thaddeus wants to be part of her life, he has to earn that privilege. That's fair. And if he ever violates our boundaries the way your mom did, he's cut off permanently. Also fair. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, Braden brought up the topic I'd been dreading. What are we going to do about Mom? I don't know, I admitted. I'm still too angry to think clearly. She's been calling Crawford too, begging him to reconsider the divorce. What does he say? That it's too late, that the trust is broken beyond repair. I understood Crawford's position, but I also knew that Delilah was Braden's mother. Eventually, we'd have to figure out some kind of relationship for his sake, if nothing else. Maybe we could start with supervised visits, I suggested. She could see Rosalind at Crawford's apartment with him present. You'd be okay with that? I think so, as long as she understands that her access is conditional on her behavior. What kind of conditions? No more surprise visits, no more accusations about my faithfulness, no more undermining our parenting decisions, and absolutely no medical procedures or tests without our explicit written consent. Those seem reasonable. And she has to acknowledge what she did wrong. Not just apologize, but actually take responsibility for the harm she caused. Think she'll do it. If she wants to see her granddaughter, she will. The next day, Braden called his mother and laid out our terms. She agreed immediately, so desperately that it was almost pathetic. The first supervised visit was scheduled for the following Saturday at Crawford's apartment. I was nervous about seeing Delilah again, but I knew we had to start somewhere. When we arrived, Crawford greeted us at the door with a big smile for Rosalind and warm hugs for both of us. He'd been doing better since moving out, seeming lighter and more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Delilah was sitting on the couch, clearly having been crying before we arrived. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her secrets and their consequences. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly when she saw us. "Don't thank us," I said. "Thank Crawford for agreeing to facilitate this." Delilah nodded and turned her attention to Rosalind, who was now 8 months old and sitting up on her own. "She's gotten so big. Babies tend to do that when you don't see them for 3 weeks," I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. Crawford shot me a warning look and I forced myself to take a deep breath. This wasn't going to work if I couldn't at least try to be civil. For the next hour, we made awkward small talk while Delilah played with Rosalind on the floor. It was clear that she loved her granddaughter deeply, which made the whole situation even more tragic. Finally, Crawford suggested that Braden and I take a walk so he and Delilah could talk privately. I wasn't thrilled about leaving Rosalind alone with her grandmother after everything that had happened, but Crawford assured me he wouldn't leave them unsupervised. When we returned an hour later, both Crawford and Delilah looked emotionally drained. "Everything okay?" Braden asked. "We talked," Crawford said simply, "about a lot of things that needed to be said. And your mother understands that while I can eventually forgive her for both of our sakes, I can't trust her again. Our marriage is over, but we'll always be connected through you." Delilah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know I've lost everything. My husband, my son's respect, my granddaughter's trust. But I want you to know that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. It's going to take time," I said honestly. "I know, and I'm prepared to wait as long as it takes." As we drove home that afternoon, I felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe, with enough time and effort, we could rebuild some kind of functional relationship with Delilah. It would never be the same as before, but it might be workable. But that optimism was shattered the next week when I received a call from an unknown number. "Is this Mrs. Forrester?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Cassandra Williams. I'm a private investigator. I've been hired to conduct a background check on you and your family." My blood ran cold. "Hired by whom?" "I'm not at liberty to say, but I wanted to give you a heads up that someone is looking into your financial records, employment history, and personal relationships." "Why are you warning me?" "Because the person who hired me seems to be looking for ammunition rather than information, and that doesn't sit right with me." After she hung up, I immediately called Braden at work. "Someone hired a private investigator to dig into our background," I told him. "What? Who would do that?" "I have a pretty good idea." That evening, we confronted Delilah. She didn't even try to deny it. "I needed to make sure you weren't hiding anything," she said defensively. "After everything that's happened, I had to protect my family." "We are your family," Braden said, his voice shaking with anger. "And you just proved that you haven't learned anything from this entire nightmare." "But what? I interrupted. "What if I'm exactly who I've always said I am? What if the only liar in this family is you?" "I was just being careful." "You were being paranoid and vindictive," Braden said. "And you've just lost any chance of rebuilding our relationship." "Braden, please." "No, I'm done. We gave you another chance and you threw it away. Don't contact us again." We left her standing in her empty house, crying into the silence. That night, Braden called Crawford to tell him what had happened. "I'm not surprised," Crawford said sadly. "She called me yesterday asking if I thought you might leave her and take Rosalind away permanently. I told her that depended entirely on her behavior going forward." "Well, now we have our answer about her behavior." "I'm sorry, son. I really hoped she could change." "So did I." The next morning, I received another call from the private investigator. "The person who hired me has requested a more intensive investigation," she said, "including surveillance of your daily activities and interviews with your friends and coworkers." "And you're still warning me?" "Actually, I'm declining the job. This has crossed the line from due diligence into harassment. I thought you should know that she'll probably find someone else to take the case. Thank you for your integrity." "No problem. For what it's worth, your background is squeaky clean. You're exactly who you appear to be." I hung up and immediately called our lawyer to discuss options for stopping Delilah's investigation. He advised us to document everything and be prepared to file for a restraining order if her behavior escalated. It did. Over the next month, we discovered that Delilah had contacted my employer to ask about my moral character, called my college friends to ask about my dating history, hired someone to go through our garbage, attempted to access our bank records through false pretenses, questioned our neighbors about our marriage. Each incident was carefully documented and reported to our lawyer. Finally, he had enough evidence to petition for a restraining order. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early October. Crawford accompanied us for moral support, and we were surprised to see Thaddeus in the courtroom as well. When the judge asked Delilah to explain her actions, she broke down completely. "I know I was wrong," she sobbed, "but I've already lost my husband and my son's respect. I couldn't bear to lose my granddaughter too. I thought if I could prove that she was hiding something, anything, then maybe people would understand that I'm not the only one who's made mistakes." "So you decided to harass and stalk my clients?" our lawyer asked. "I was protecting my family. By violating their privacy and attempting to sabotage their reputations?" Delilah had no answer for that. The judge granted our restraining order, prohibiting Delilah from contacting us directly or indirectly, coming within 500 feet of our home or workplace, or conducting any further investigations into our personal lives. As we left the courthouse, Thaddeus approached us. "I wanted you to know that I had nothing to do with what she's been doing," he said. "I think she's having some kind of breakdown. That's not our problem anymore," I said firmly. "I know. I just wanted you to understand that this isn't who she really is. Isn't it?" Braden asked, "because from where I'm standing, this looks like the logical extension of 30 years of lies and paranoia." Thaddeus winced but didn't argue. "I also wanted to tell you that I'm moving to Florida," he said. "I accepted a job with a construction company down there. I think it's best if I get out of everyone's way." "You don't have to leave town because of us," Braden said. "Yeah, I do. Crawford made it clear that he never wants to see me again. You're trying to build a life with your family. And your mother is," he gestured vaguely in the direction of the courthouse. "Well, you saw. What about the business? Crawford bought me out last week. He's renaming it and moving to a new location. Fresh start for everyone." Braden was quiet for a moment. "Will you stay in touch?" "If you want me to." "I think I'd like that. Occasional emails, maybe a Christmas card. Nothing dramatic." "I'd like that too." They shook hands awkwardly, and Thaddeus walked away. I had the feeling we'd never see him again, despite their promises to stay in touch. Crawford was waiting for us by our car. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Relieved," I said honestly. "And sad. Despite everything, I never wanted it to end this way." "I know. But some people can't handle the consequences of their actions. Instead of accepting responsibility and trying to make amends, they double down on their worst impulses." "Do you think she'll respect the restraining order?" "I hope so. But if she doesn't, you call the police immediately. Don't try to handle it yourselves." That evening, as we put Rosalind to bed, Brayden and I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed in just 2 months. Do you ever regret opening that DNA test? He asked. I thought about it. No. As awful as this has been, I'd rather know the truth. And I'd rather Rosalind grow up in a family built on honesty instead of lies. Even if that family is smaller than it used to be. Quality over quantity, I said. Crawford loves us unconditionally. We have my parents and my siblings. We have good friends and each other. That's enough. What if Delilah tries to contact us again? Then we deal with it. But I'm not going to live in fear of someone who's already shown us exactly who she is. For the next few months, life settled into a new normal. Crawford had dinner with us every Sunday, took Rosalind to the park on Saturdays, and generally filled the grandfather role better than he ever had when he was married to Delilah. We heard through mutual friends that Delilah had sold her house and moved to a small apartment across town. She was seeing a therapist and attending support groups for people dealing with guilt and shame. Part of me hoped she was getting the help she needed, but I wasn't ready to let her back into our lives. Thaddeus sent Christmas cards from Florida, including pictures of his new life working construction on high-rise buildings. He looked happier than I'd ever seen him, which made me think leaving town had been the right choice for everyone. The restraining order was set to expire after 1 year, which gave us all time to heal and move forward. But as Rosalind's first birthday approached, I found myself thinking about Delilah more often. Despite everything she'd done, she was still Brayden's mother and the woman who'd raised him. She'd made terrible choices, but she'd also changed his diapers, nursed him through illnesses, and celebrated his achievements. I've been thinking, I said to Brayden one evening as we planned Rosalind's birthday party, maybe we should consider letting your mom attend. He looked at me in surprise. Really? Supervised, of course, and with strict boundaries. But she is Rosalind's grandmother, and it feels wrong to exclude her from major milestones forever. What changed your mind? Time, I guess. And watching Crawford model forgiveness. He's not ready to reconcile with her, but he's not actively trying to punish her either. Would you be comfortable having her there? I think so. As long as Crawford is there too, and she understands that any inappropriate behavior will result in her being asked to leave. Brayden was quiet for a long moment. I miss her, he admitted. I'm still angry about what she did, but I miss having a mom. Then let's invite her. 1 hour, supervised, and she brings a gift but doesn't get alone time with Rosalind. Are you sure? No, but I think it's worth trying. The call to Delilah was awkward but brief. She cried when Brayden invited her to the party, promising to follow whatever rules we set and just grateful for the chance to see her granddaughter on her birthday. The party was small. Just us, Crawford, my parents, and Delilah. I watched her carefully throughout the afternoon, looking for signs of her old suspicious behavior. But she seemed genuinely focused on enjoying time with Rosalind and didn't ask any probing questions or make any inappropriate comments. When it was time for her to leave, she approached me carefully. Thank you, she said simply, for letting me be here today. You're welcome. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm working on myself. I'm trying to understand why I made the choices I did and how to do better. I hope that's true. It is. And I hope that someday, maybe you'll be able to trust me again. Maybe, I said, but it's going to take time. I understand. After she left, Crawford helped us clean up while Rosalind napped. How do you think that went? He asked. Better than I expected, I admitted. She seemed different, more self-aware. Therapy will do that to you, Crawford said. I've been going myself to work through the anger and betrayal. Is it helping? Yeah. I'm learning that forgiveness isn't about excusing someone's behavior or trusting them again. It's about letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison your own life. Have you forgiven Delilah? I'm working on it. Some days are better than others. And Thaddeus? Crawford was quiet for a moment. That's harder. The betrayal feels more personal because he's my brother, but I'm trying. Over the next few months, we allowed Delilah to attend a few more family events, always supervised, always with clear boundaries. She seemed to be making a genuine effort to change, attending therapy regularly and respecting our rules without complaint. When Rosalind turned 18 months old, I made a decision that surprised even me. I think we should let your mom babysit for a few hours, I told Brayden. Are you serious? She's been consistent for almost a year now. She hasn't violated any of our boundaries or shown any signs of her old paranoid behavior. And Rosalind needs to have a relationship with her grandmother. What if something happens? She'll be at Crawford's apartment with him present. If anything goes wrong, he'll call us immediately. You really think she's changed? I think she's trying to change. And I think we owe it to Rosalind to give her the chance to have a relationship with both of her grandparents. The first babysitting session was only 2 hours, and I called twice to check in. But everything went smoothly, and when we picked up Rosalind, both she and Delilah seemed happy and relaxed. Thank you, Delilah said as we were leaving. I know you didn't have to trust me with this. Don't make me regret it, I said firmly. I won't. I promise. And for the most part, she kept that promise. There were still moments when I caught glimpses of her old suspicious nature, but she seemed to recognize those impulses and redirect them before they became problematic. When Rosalind turned 2, Delilah asked if she could take her to the zoo, alone, without Crawford's supervision. I don't know, I said honestly. That's a big step. I understand your hesitation, but I've been going to therapy for over a year now. I've learned to recognize my triggers and manage my anxiety. And I love Rosalind more than anything in the world. I looked at Brayden, who nodded slightly. Okay, I said. But you keep your phone on. You stick to the plan we discuss ahead of time, and you bring her home at exactly the time we agree on. Of course. The zoo trip went perfectly. Delilah sent pictures throughout the day, returned Rosalind at exactly the agreed-upon time, and gave us a detailed recap of their activities. She was wonderful, Delilah said as she handed over a sleepy toddler. She loved the elephants and the butterfly garden, and she kept saying Gamma the whole time. Seeing the joy on Delilah's face reminded me why forgiveness was important, not just for her, but for all of us. As Rosalind grew older, her relationship with both of her grandparents deepened. Crawford remained her primary grandfather figure, taking her to the park and reading bedtime stories and spoiling her with toys and attention. But Delilah carved out her own special role, teaching Rosalind to bake cookies and paint pictures and sing silly songs. On Rosalind's third birthday, I watched the 3 generations of our complicated family celebrating together and felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. We'd been through betrayal and lies and broken trust, but we'd also learned about forgiveness and second chances and the resilience of love. Delilah never fully regained my complete trust. Some wounds are too deep to heal entirely, but she earned my respect through her consistent efforts to change and her unwavering love for her granddaughter. Crawford eventually started dating someone new, a kind woman named Patricia, who understood his complicated family history and embraced Rosalind as her own grandchild. When they got married 2 years later, Delilah graciously attended the ceremony and wished them well. Thaddeus remained in Florida, sending occasional cards and gifts but maintaining his distance. Braden kept his promise to stay in touch, but their relationship remained more obligatory than emotional. Some bridges once burned can never be fully rebuilt, but the most important relationships survived and even thrived. Braden and I grew closer through the crisis, learning to support each other through difficult times. Our marriage was stronger for having weathered the storm of family dysfunction and betrayal. Crawford remained the most important father figure in Braden's life, proving that love and commitment matter more than biology. Their bond was actually deeper after learning the truth because it was based on choice rather than assumption. And Rosalind grew up knowing she was loved by multiple adults who had all made mistakes, but were trying their best to do right by her. Sometimes, when I looked at old family photos from before the DNA test revelation, I felt sad for what we'd lost. The illusion of a perfect family, the simplicity of unquestioned relationships, the comfort of believing everyone was exactly who they appeared to be. But then I'd look at our current family, smaller but more honest, scarred but stronger, and I knew we'd made the right choices. Truth is painful sometimes, but it's also liberating. Living authentically, even when it's messy and complicated, is better than living a beautiful lie. The DNA test that Delilah intended as an attack on my integrity became the catalyst for our family's transformation. It forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, make difficult decisions, and rebuild relationships on stronger foundations. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a family is having its deepest secrets exposed. Not because the truth doesn't hurt, but because healing can only begin once the lies stop. And we did heal, differently than before, but completely. Because at its core, family isn't about shared DNA or perfect people making perfect choices. It's about imperfect people choosing to love each other despite their flaws, forgive each other's mistakes, and show up for each other when it matters most. Delilah's betrayal taught us that trust, once broken, requires years of consistent effort to rebuild. But it also taught us that people can change, that forgiveness is possible, and that second chances, carefully given and consistently earned, can lead to deeper, more authentic relationships. Crawford's pain taught us that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is end a relationship that's built on deception. But his eventual forgiveness taught us that letting go of anger doesn't mean forgetting the lesson or excusing the behavior. It means refusing to let someone else's choices poison your own future. Braden's struggle with his identity taught us that biology is just one piece of who we are. The man who raised him, loved him, and shaped his values was his real father in every way that mattered. The man who contributed his DNA was a part of his story, but not the most important part. And I learned that sometimes the most unexpected crises can strengthen a marriage if both partners choose to face them together, instead of letting them drive them apart. 5 years after that devastating Sunday dinner, I can honestly say that our family is happier and healthier than it was before. We're more honest with each other, more intentional about our relationships, and more grateful for the love we share. Rosalind will grow up knowing the truth about her family's complicated history. She'll understand that people make mistakes, that forgiveness is possible, and that love comes in many different forms. She'll know that Crawford is her grandfather because he chooses to be, that Delilah earned her way back into their lives through hard work and consistency, and that her parents' marriage is strong enough to weather any storm. Most importantly, she'll know that she's surrounded by adults who learned from their mistakes and chose to do better, not just for themselves, but for her. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never opened that DNA test. If Delilah's secret had remained buried for another decade or two, would Crawford have eventually figured it out? Would Thaddeus have ever confessed? Would the weight of the lies have eventually destroyed their relationships anyway? I'll never know the answer to those questions, but I'm grateful that the truth came out when it did, in a way that allowed us to address it honestly and move forward thoughtfully. Because the truth is, every family has secrets. Some are small and relatively harmless. Others, like ours, have the power to reshape everything you thought you knew about the people you love. But secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, have a way of poisoning relationships from the inside out. They create distance, suspicion, and resentment. They force people to live divided lives, always guarding against discovery. When secrets are finally revealed, the immediate pain is intense but temporary. The healing that follows, if you're brave enough to pursue it, lasts forever. Our family learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing harmful behavior. It means choosing not to let someone else's poor choices define your future. It means setting healthy boundaries while leaving room for redemption. It means protecting yourself and your children while still believing in the possibility of change. We learned that love isn't always enough to sustain a relationship. Trust, respect, and honesty are equally important. But we also learned that genuine love can survive betrayal if both parties are willing to do the hard work of rebuilding. Most importantly, we learned that family is both a gift and a choice. We're connected to some people by blood, but we choose every day whether to remain connected by love. The DNA test revealed that our family tree was more complicated than we'd realized. But it also revealed that the strongest branches aren't necessarily the biological ones. They're the ones built through years of daily choices to show up, support each other, and stick together through both joy and pain. And that's a truth worth knowing.